Hello again. I come to you unprepared and confused. I'm not sure if there is such a thing as the blank microphone for an expression, but I have a feeling I'm going to be encountering one very often. And I suppose also that is the purpose of these reflections is to show up, whether it is done or undone, to show up. I don't really have a method, and I am not sure if I will ever have one because I don't seem to be a method man. But loosely speaking, what I'm doing is I choose a subject, or rather a subject chooses me, something catches my eye or my ear. And then once I have decided that that is what I will bring to you, then I let it resonate inside for a week or two. I'm not sure how often I will come here, but I don't think I want to leave it further than a couple of weeks. I think then I might feel too scared of returning. But yeah, so the idea is I let it resonate, I let it feel me, I let it shift me inside. And then I'm not able to put it down to paper and then give it to you in a way that feels fresh and natural. I might do some written pieces, but I will consider them more as an artistic endeavor. And for these ones, I really want you to have just, well, me. To share this moment, not so much from a teacher to student or a therapist to client perspective, but just me, whichever value that has. So what chose me this time was the subject of loneliness and disconnection. I have lost the count of how many times I have heard people saying, psychiatrists, psychologists, sociologists, social workers, how we are going through a crisis of loneliness and disconnection where people feel isolated. And the depression rates and the suicide rates are skyrocketing while we seem to be going through a time in history where not only things are more comfortable, but the possibility to reach one another is easier, in theory. And yet the felt experience is isolation, disconnection. So this is what has inhabited me for the last few days. Loneliness. And to be precise, you can climb a mountain, you fall off a ditch, you break your ankle and you are alone and you need rescue and no one is coming and you are scared and lonely. And you can be in a prison cell, forced in isolation. Or maybe your mind functions in a way that wraps around itself and you find yourself inside a bubble and you cannot get out. There are situations and moments where we might be forcefully isolated. But I don't think this is what comes to mind when we tackle that subject. I think we are all thinking about functionally integrated human being that has gone to work and been productive the whole day and is returning home and closes the door of his apartment. And after dinner, right before going to bed, there is the sadness of not feeling that you are making a difference for anyone, not feeling important for anyone, not feeling seen by anyone. And as I contemplate this scene, I feel so tempted, so tempted of either talking to this man or this woman and saving him or her from that pain. Or the opposite, immediately I can see myself becoming her, feeling cut off, feeling isolated, and feeling lonely. But the first reflection that comes is that we are continuously flipping from one to the other. I have moments of deep insight where I have so many arguments to explain myself that we are connected to everything and everyone constantly. And yet there are moments that I feel existentially alone. And I suppose you feel that too sometimes. But what I recognize in my life when I have gone through a period where the feeling of loneliness is increased in urgency and intensity is that is important. Regardless of when or how, when loneliness and disconnection appears, is a priority one feeling. It indicates that it is important to pay attention and gain presence. It's one of those feelings that feels really bad. And is very deeply felt. You can pretend outside, but if you feel that inside, it doesn't leave you. You carry it with you everywhere you go. So the continuation and the level of irritation that it creates already in itself, I think is enough of an alarm to not look away from it. But also, it challenges our observation of reality, beginning with the fact that we are mammals and unable to survive without the support of our families and our communities. So I think the feeling feels so painful because ultimately it contradicts empiric observation. We see that everything is connected. And even if we put ourselves in the shoes of this isolated person in the bubble apartment in the city is buzzing with life. There is tons of people all over the place, moving and bumping into each other, not just people, but the structures that we create, animals, plants, buildings, history. So the feeling of being cut off of an ocean of life that is constantly swarming feels so sharply painful. But in itself, I think the pain that it carries has the potential, or at least can be seen as a moment in life to question direction, to ask myself where I'm going and if where I'm going is where I really want to go. Also because in one way you can consider yourself a field of consciousness, and no one really can feel the way you do. There is absolutely no way for me to enter into your space. But somehow we have evolved to these complex creatures that have developed language. So it feels almost like a fundamental function of the human shape, the fact that we can communicate and share how we feel inside our bubble fields, and to develop enough permeability in our fields so they can interact with each other. So almost in a fundamental way, to be human is to be a tentacle for connection, like the reaching finger of creation, so you can meet with the finger that is coming from the other side. So for all these and more, if loneliness appears, is to be looked at, I think, is a moment that is asking for a pause. And also I think because, in a way, the very fact that there is no time for pause is what is causing loneliness itself. We'll suffer through our loneliness, but while feeling that there's nothing we can do about it, because my boss, or my job, or the city that I live in, or society, or the world, and in one way or another, I feel like a victim of my circumstances. But I think loneliness is strong enough to trigger a heartfelt desire for agency, because it is almost impossible to really approach the subject if one feels imprisoned by the rules of others, by the rules of the past, by the rules of a corporation or a government. And especially now that we are passing, I heard the other day in a conversation, someone calling this time that we are living a temporal border town. I love the expression. We are moving through a period where the laws of the past, they don't function. And the future is not yet painted properly. So in these moments, if it ever was important to feel free to make your own destiny and take your own decisions, I find never more important than now, because there are no points of reference. I mean, you can try to look at how people would relate in community in indigenous cultures, but there's no way to relate to that from where we are at. So personal freedom and agency, that is always important, even if you live in a ideal, harmonious society where everybody is beautiful and loving to each other. Still you want to have that deep sensation of free will, yeah? But in what it looks like, the decades where we are going to see the collapse of one way of life and is going to express itself sadly, but probably necessarily as a lot of chaos and confusion. For you to keep your agency, for you to keep the feeling that you navigate through life according to your own book, I find it fundamental. And the first thing that loneliness calls for is to look closer. And for that you need time, for that you need to pause. We need to have enough mental space, we need to have enough time in our life so that we can lift the transcendent at least to the same level as the practical. And especially with such a huge question as not feeling that we are connected, which is the whole purpose that we came here as mammals, to interact and to with one another. So my first response to the feeling when it comes is to inhabit it, to really fully inhabit it, to not push it away. to really pause in the feeling, to get the nuances, to get the details, and to come clean with myself that I seek to connect. There is not force, there is not something that I should do, but that there is sincere volition behind my desire to feel connected, to feel part of something greater than myself. And once I recognize that, then I allow for space so that the feeling can guide me. As a first step, I begin to recognize all of the widths, because connection is not just to people, yeah? Connection is any moment where two parts come in contact with each other. And there is no shortage of that, because that in itself is the life that we experience all the time. Things bumping into each other, constantly, endlessly. A few things and a lot of things. We tend to see ourselves as a singular entity, yeah? But if we dive into our bodies, we are made of trillions of cells, microorganisms. Hardly we can consider ourselves as a one isolated thing. We ourselves are an ecosystem. And there also you can see a little bit the paradox of the feeling of loneliness. And is that we are scared of being alone, but at the same time we want to be special enough. So it's me, and I'm different, and I'm unique, and I'm independent. So you see, because we are paradoxically divided internally between our desire to connect and our desire to be unique, we are constantly experiencing the two sides of the same coin. And it's important that in one way or another we find a peaceful resolution between them. I myself, for a few years now, I talk to everything. I talk to people. But when I'm living, I create enough space and time around so I can look at the interaction that life is providing me with on a moment to moment. I don't miss a tree, I don't miss a bird, I don't miss a cloud. And I talk to, but I realize we talk too much. When we decide that it's time for interaction, it seems like the first thing I want to tell my story. So I'm teaching myself to listen. And yeah, a cloud is quiet. Or the ocean might seem to be speaking in the same sound the whole time, but you learn to pick up nuances. You learn to be part of without feeling insignificant. To be an ant in an ant hill without that having this mechanical sense of being a cog in the machine that sometimes we fear so much. There's a certain sense of grace in feeling part of an evolutionary adventure, and I play my role as a human. And then when I see other humans in my path, this habit of speaking and listening to the environment and taking time to see in someone's eyes, taking time to let them see in my eyes. And this creates also a shift of where the focus is, because the same way that when we communicate with life, we have a tendency to speak first. In the exchange, I think we also have a tendency to want to get rather than to want to give. But I'm not sure this brings us the happiness that we think it will, because it seems that it is the moments when you give that you experience the greatest sense of joy and connection. So oftentimes, the question that we can ask ourselves when we feel very isolated is not, where can I go so I get that which I need? But sometimes the question that we have to ask is, where can I give? What can I give? Or maybe rather, what would I like to give? What do I enjoy sharing? And in the answering of this question is probably where we face the biggest challenge, yes? If I go to the process that I'm facing now with recording these reflections, during this last week, I've come to the microphone 2 or 3 times, and the biggest sense of isolation has been the sensation that I don't dare myself to show imperfections, that I feel that you will judge what I say, that I feel I will come short. In one way or another, I will be inadequate and you will reject me, which will in turn increase the isolation that I already feel. And it becomes a loop. If I put myself in the situation where I'm already being judged, then I will avoid doing the things that will provide me with the connection that I seek. So somewhere in there, there is an element of soft courage. Or maybe it's not even that, maybe it's realism, calm realism, where you see that in order to experience that which you seek to experience, you have to get yourself a little bit out of the way. And there, to be available, to be accessible, to be open, to call a friend, to cry. But that you dare to recognize that to feel that we belong to something bigger than ourselves. It's fundamental, because it's fundamentally true. Windy, rainy, stormy day here in the Algarve. Lots of reality to listen to and connect with. I will continue with my day, but I wanted to say thanks for being there. Yeah. It's time to appreciate one another fully. Not that we didn't do it before, but we are discovering that we want to do it more. I wish you have a beautiful day. I wish you are healthy, and to the degree that is possible, happy. And when the tears come, that they come for a good reason. Big hug, my friend.